This one. And make sure everybody's turned on. Hey, everyone. How's everybody doing out there? Look who we have today. Today we have Philip Hodgetts from the West Coast, right, Philip?
Yep.
And then below me, I have to twist my arm around, move my arm this way. We have Mr. Brad Olsen. Are you in Utah today, Brad?
Yes, I am.
There you go. So we're spread out all across the United States.
I'm disturbed that he had to think about it.
I just presume he's always in Utah.
I'm just thinking, like, if I look that way, am I looking at Richard, and that way I'm looking at Philip?
That's exactly correct. Yes.
Those eye lines. Yeah. Okay.
Yes, that's exactly
correct.
What
I was distracted with.
So we got a couple of comments, of course. There's the first one. Excited for this. Excited to see you guys. And then we have this one from Jason. It says, I'm waiting to see what's next first. What does that mean? I think he means,
hardware-wise.
Yeah. So let's raise our hand, whoever's bought a Mac Studio. I'll put mine down. None of us?
No.
I just got my MacBook Pro and then one Max, so I don't feel like I need to rush out and buy a new computer.
Yeah, I upgraded to a 14-inch M1 earlier this year, and have a nice 24-inch monitor for extended desktop that connects to all my drives. So I don't feel the need to upgrade just at the moment. But I'm not the sort of power user that the studio is built for either.
Right. If I was going to get one, I wouldn't get the Ultra at this point. I'd just get the Max. That's plenty for what I do with Final Cut. What about you, Brad, if you were going to get one?
I would get the Ultra for one reason, which is, well, not for one reason, but one of the biggest selling points of the Ultra is the fact that you get 6 Thunderbolt ports instead of 4.
Well, that's true. That's true.
And I'm always running out of ports. So
well, I am too.
if
No,
you
absolutely.
Give me more ports, then I mean,
very expensive.
the trash
ports.
can had. Yeah, I mean, it's that, and then obviously it's a double M1 Max processor, right? So you're getting a lot more beefy processor. But I remember on the Mac Pro trash can, it had 6 Thunderbolt 2 ports. There was 3 Thunderbolt buses, but I filled those up immediately when I got it. So, and I know that people, they advertise you can daisy chain Thunderbolt, but I always find when you try to daisy chain hard drives or different devices, you get like diminishing returns on that. You don't get the full speed of like a RAID drive, for example, if it's later in the chain. So as many direct ports as I can have as possible is always an advantage.
Yeah, so here's the thing. But I have the same MacBook Pro that Brad has. And thanks to Brad, I got the 4 terabyte SSD rather than the 2 terabyte, because we were talking about that time, and I had actually ordered the 2 terabyte because that's what I had on my Mac Pro. I said, that's plenty. And then I was talking to Brad, and I said, oh, he's getting the 4 terabyte? I can't go to NAB and stuff and have him have the 4 terabyte, and I've got the 2 terabyte. What the heck? I can't be doing that. So,
Brad, you
buying the bigger boat.
You should have called me. I had 2 terabytes, and I probably should have gone for 4.
Yeah.
Oh, are you feeling it already? I mean, 2's.
I'm down to about 300 gigabytes spare on my. So like, yeah, I probably should have gone 4.
Yeah, I'm glad I did the 4. 8 I don't need, but the 4 absolutely is the new standard for me. And first off, that thing is so fast. I mean, it's extremely, extremely fast. So that's one of the things. But the other thing is
you can get fast SSDs that you connect externally, but when you have that speed in the computer, for sure, it's just makes everything more enjoyable.
Yeah, and I have 4. I'm trying to keep limited to about 1 terabyte of use, maybe 2. Now the thing is with me is I have this one program called Superior Drummer that's like almost half a terabyte of samples. It's like 360 some terabyte of samples, and I keep that, of course, internally. So I knew I was going to have that, and then there's some other Logic has some other things, loops and stuff that take up some space. So, but I'm the same way.
What are you filling your hard drive up with?
Mostly.
I said Philip. What's Philip filling
this? Yeah, much the same as Richard. I mean, there's a lot of samples for stuff. There's images. I don't get much media on there, but there's just apps just have a lot of junk these days. It seems to be associated with them. Even Final Cut's got an extra like 3 or 4 gigabytes, 5 gigabytes of extras to add on to a 3 gigabyte application. So it doesn't take too many of them and a couple of Adobe apps, and voila. And then of course, but most of the stuff is on external drives. I mean, anything I produce is on an external drive. Although I shoot my video these days, my presenter video these days by typing it into a web page. So that's a whole lot easier.
Right, exactly. So I have, I'm trying to keep enough free so if I pick the laptop up, I can go with some storage without thinking, oh, I got to take stuff off here. So I ended up getting a 56 terabyte OWC RAID 5 that I really like. It's really, really been doing well for me.
Is it the Flex 8 or is
Flex
it
8.
Different model? Yeah, okay.
Flex 8. So the Flex 8 has two USB 3 ports on the front. It has a Thunderbolt port on the back, and it takes express cards. So that's additional ports. But I have my OWC dock. Now, I don't work for OWC. I'm saying their name, but I don't work for them. They don't pay me. I got the Thunderbolt 4 dock that has 3 USB 3s, and I have that connected to an older set of docks. So I have like 14 USB 3 ports. So I don't have them all filled, but I have a lot of them filled. Because the 2019 Mac Pro, I had, how many Thunderbolt ports did I have? I had 8 Thunderbolt 3 ports on that, and I had a USB 3 card in that, PCIe card in that. Speaking of that, what do you think they're going to do with PCIe in the Mac Pro when it comes out? Any idea?
The next up Mac Pro that they teased at the end of the last event.
Yeah. Are they going to do PCIe?
I would think they would. I have no idea. I would.
That's the
I would
thing.
think, given that the last model came out in 2019, I don't know why you would invest that much time and energy in building that form factor and not stick with such a expandable, modular, like everything you want to do form factor. Obviously, I think if you're going to support the new silicon chips, that my guess would be you'd have to switch out motherboards and some of the components, but I would think they would try to keep all the same slots and ports and at least have a very similar form factor moving forward. But I could be totally wrong. I just don't know why you'd make that effort to make a new Mac Pro and then tease that they're upgrading the Mac Pro and then say, oh, by the way, it looks completely different. It's smaller. We decided you don't need, the 8 slots. Like that seems like a really weird backwards direction.
Yeah, but I wouldn't.
And the trash can, model, like we have that replacement now with the Mac Studio. So the kind of in between user where you might buy an iMac Pro or, the cylinder before that, I think the Mac Studio solves the problem between those users and, the people who are going to fork out $15,000, $20,000 on a system want what the current Mac Pro offers, but maybe, make it faster, more power efficient, or just do the Apple Silicon thing, which is obviously they announced a 2-year kind of upgrade cycle, so that comes due in June. My guess would be like 2019, where they're like, here's the new Mac Pro. It'll come out fall of 2022, and then they'll wait till like December 20th or whatever to actually ship them.
Well, speaking of
that a couple times before,
they did that to the Mac Pro, their trash can. They announced it at WWDC, and it came out later in the year. iMac Pro, the same thing, announced it at WWDC. It came out later in the year. 2019, the Mac Pro, they announced it at WWDC. It came out, like you said, in December. So it seems like that's what if they're going to introduce the Mac Pro this year, I'm not convinced that it's coming out in 2022 because they have the Mac Mini coming out, the M2. They have maybe a MacBook Air coming out. I don't expect the MacBook Pro, the 16-inch, to be updated this year.
No, the MacBook Pro probably not, but the Mac Pro, I mean that's what they said at the end of the Mac. It was John or whoever that was at the end of the Mac Studio announcement said, and we of course still got to upgrade the Mac Pro, but that's for another time.
Yes,
that's a huge tease. Oh, did we lose Phil?
Yes, we did.
Oh no. But his hair looks nice.
I'll put you in there. There he is.
We lost Phil.
There he is. He's back.
He's back.
He's back.
What happened? Did you notice you cut out on us, Phil? We can't hear you.
Yeah, we can't hear you for some odd reason.
Gotta look at those settings. All right, well.
Check your settings, Phil, for audio. Something. There was something. Something just cut in and out.
Yeah. Strange. Live broadcasts are so much fun.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, I've even seen this on national broadcast. If you can't see anything, Phil, just go ahead and there you go and come back again.
So, yeah, I guess my question is I've seen rumors about M2 basically since the M1's been announced, but instead of getting the M2 every event, it's like, okay, we're going to do the M1 Pro, the M1 Max, the M1 Ultra. So I have no idea if, like when they would want to do an M2 Mac Mini or an M2 MacBook Air. I know I've seen the rumors, but
Well, you
those
figure
rumors have been a little off every time.
no, they have, but they have done a Mac event in the fall for the last 2 years. Okay, they introduced the original M1 with the small MacBook Pro and the Mac Mini, and then last year they did our MacBook Pro. So I expect them to do another Mac event in the fall. What else would it be but an M2 Mac Mini? You know?
Yeah,
and
maybe in
MacBook
the
Air.
fall.
Unless that's when they do the Pro.
Do you think they're ready for the Pro though? I mean, it'd have to be the M2, don't you think?
I just think they'll refresh the whole line before they repeat anything, but that's just my opinion. Unfounded, in fact.
I would think that the M
with
Pro is the most difficult one for them to do. So that's going to that's going to be the end of the line. So I'm just thinking this fall it's going to be the M2 Mac Mini, maybe the MacBook Air. And I know people are disagreeing, but I think they're going to have a larger iMac coming out at some point.
Seems to fairly strong consensus that's not the case.
Right, but think about it though. They're not. Do you think they're going to stick the iMac at 24 inches for its rest of its entire life? That doesn't seem like it's something they would do. I mean, who goes and buys?
Depends where they see the iMac fitting in the range now. I mean, bigger screen, go for the studio.
But that doesn't. Yeah, it is right now. But some people don't want. Who goes out and buys a 24-inch monitor these days?
I have a 24-inch. You're talking to two people.
If you're buying in 2022, are you going to buy a 24-inch monitor?
Yes, I bought it in 2022.
Did you?
With my 14-inch. Yes, to go with my 14-inch MacBook Pro. So.
Yeah, well, for the MacBook Pro, I just don't think that 24 is that popular, and I'm surprised that I thought the 27-inch was a very popular machine, both the regular and the iMac Pro. So I just don't see them. Sticking the iMac at that 24 inches for the rest of its life. I think they're going to,
Maybe we'll see a larger iMac come back once the M2 architecture is there, because I don't know what the development was like for the Mac Studio, but there probably came a point when they realized, because of the amount of cooling they had to do on that Ultra processor, that they could not put that in a form factor like what we see in the Studio Display. Like the Studio Display would be your kind of large iMac, right?
Yes.
And once they decided that because you look at it and it's like, really all the hardware components could fit in a normal Mac Mini, and then the top more than half looks like it's just cooling. And when you jump from the Max to the Ultra, you actually get a heavier Mac Studio because it's the copper cooling. And
2 pounds heavier, I think.
Thicker, and it's heavier. It's 2 pounds heavier. So obviously, but it seems to me that the case was they realized they could not fit that form factor into an iMac, so they made this separate Mac Studio.
Has Apple ever made a Mac computer that the cooling system was larger than the rest of the Mac? I was really surprised that it's like a top almost 2/3, and then the bottom is, like you said, fits in the Mac Mini. I was like, wow.
You look at the cylinder design, it was 3 boards and then a big fan in the middle. So, it kind of was a giant thermal cooling thing with just the hardware on the outside. But those boards were still pretty large. It's definitely an interesting, design. It definitely seems like a function over form situation, which I think for those of us who work in a more creative professional space, appreciate when they lean a little bit more towards the function, even though we love our gorgeous Apple products and we want them to look pretty. But the MacBook Pros, the 14-inch and the 16-inch, 2016, it was all about being thinner. And then now we're back to, fatter MacBook Pros. But I love it. I love my MacBook Pro being a little bit beefier and a little bit thicker and having more ports. Oh, I can't hear you, Richard.
No, Richard's dropped off.
I switched scenes and I had them muted. So I even like, it's the same thing, Brad, with the iPhone. I don't care about protruding lenses. I want beef. I want, a pro level phone to have pro storage, and I don't care about the protruding lenses. Maybe it drives Johnny Ives crazy, but not me. I'm the same way.
Well, I think we're seeing a post Johnny Ive Apple design team too, because the emphasis has gone away from having it as thin as it possibly can be to have it as functional as it possibly can be and still look decent.
At least for the
I'm
pros.
actually in favor of that. Yeah,
I
at least
am too.
with the MacBook Pro, at least it's got an SD card slot which I use every day for my food photography. It's got enough ports to connect to it. It has everything that I needed in a laptop that the previous generations had not. So it became an all-in-one computer that I could still take with me on the occasions that I want to take it with me.
Exactly. So we get one comment from Michael that says, for Final Cut Pro, would you max out the Mac Studio Ultra to 32 GPUs and 128 gigs of RAM, and why?
Well, I think Philip's already answered. He wouldn't get it.
Right.
But the reason I wouldn't, even if I was in that market, is because to go right at the highest end of any Mac product, you're always paying a significant premium, even though you're not getting a lot of extra performance. And although Final Cut would take advantage of all that extra performance, there's nothing you can do in Final Cut that would stress it that much. I mean,
for
we've already
Final
seen
Cut,
people doing 64 streams of HD multicams going, in the old generation. So what do we got now? So no, I would never max it out to the top line on top of any Apple product, and particularly for Final Cut.
Yeah, I think if you were doing a lot of 3D modeling and that type of work that is, really pushing the graphics and the memory to the full capability, then that might make sense. If for everyday editing, I don't think you'll see that. I have noticed, because I've been playing more with USDZ models inside Motion, and that's the only thing that I see on my computer that occasionally kind of lags or is a little bit choppier than I'd like. If I put a big model into Motion, it doesn't seem to love working as quickly. Everything else, editing and everything else, is really snappy. So I don't know why I would want to go to the high end. I think every time you're configuring something, you just got to look at what your needs are. I mean, I know people who have done the 14-inch MacBook Pro, but based off of their work needs, having 8 terabytes of internal storage is more important than maxing out, say, the GPU or something. So I think finding a balance somewhere in the middle is always the way you want to go with hardware purchases.
Yeah, there's people that that spent a lot of money on the 2019 Mac Pro. I couldn't believe it. I spent $9,000, I think $9,500 on mine, and it was way more than I needed, as it turns out. And then now I'm back to the MacBook Pro as my main desktop machine. But the thing about the Mac Pro, of course, it's modular. You can add stuff, although not the Afterburner card. That was like very bizarre. $2,000 for that, and it's like, nah, don't need
and now
that.
It's all built. Now it's all built into the Max chips, Max and Ultra
Exactly.
chips.
Exactly.
And am I correct in saying that I think that the encoding decoding for ProRes built into the MacBook Pro is actually more powerful than the Afterburner card itself?
I think so. Yeah. I didn't do ProRes then, so I wasn't going to spend another $2,000 for it. But the fact that they have hardware encoding and decoding for H.264, H.265, and ProRes, 2 in our MacBook Pros and 4 in the Ultra. That's nuts.
Probably more than anything, compared to an Afterburner card, is having all that encoding, decoding built into that chip. It all goes back to that Apple unified, design, which I can only imagine. It's the most Steve Jobsy thing to do to a computer. If you think about the way he wanted the Macintosh originally constructed and how he just wanted control everything. And you actually do have a great argument for that type of obsessive control, because an afterburner card, you have to go through all these other pathways to process that and come back. And a unified architecture is just all in one. So it's pretty crazy to see that.
Yeah. But we're going to see
And
the
that
M2
happens
this year, right? You guys?
Yeah, probably. We're just going to harken back to pick up on Brad's comment and answer the question about why can't we just swap out an M1 Ultra card into the old Mac Pro. Question that came through a moment ago on the chat. And it's like, well, it seems like, just swap out a new motherboard, but it's not just a new motherboard. It's how those motherboards connect into all of the pathways and how the PCI cards are interconnected with the controller that's now built into the M1 chips. It's like, yeah, no, you couldn't really upgrade any motherboard in any computer up past a certain point.
Right.
And that's just like that to the nth degree. It's like, no.
Right.
Yeah. So, I mean, the simple answer is no. They would have to redesign the entire architecture inside the case of the old Mac Pro. But I think Brad Head's argument was quite sensible. It's like it's a form factor that's already proven. They've got power supplies and everything like that already in place. It is largely a motherboard and internal wiring redesign, but not a complete starting from scratch. So maybe they'll do that. Maybe they'll just start from scratch a third time in 10 years.
I would be surprised if they kept the same form factor for that.
I would a little bit too, because it's like just not like them.
Well, when I did a live unboxing when my Mac Pro was coming, I was watching on a thing and I did an actual live unboxing. That box weighed 85 pounds, literally, with the Mac Pro. The Mac Pro is 30-some pounds, 39 pounds. And it's inside of a giant box, and then inside that was another giant box. And it just was so, anti what Apple has been doing with, downscaling their boxes even. You're not including a charger in their iPhone and everything smaller. This thing was humongous. I mean, I would be surprised, but it certainly could be that they keep 8 PCIe slots. Before that came out, I remember I was talking to Gary Adcock, and I said, how many PCI slots would you like to see in the new Mac Pro? He said, it's got to be at least 4. It has to be 4. I'd be satisfied with 4, and they gave us 8. I don't think anybody saw that coming. I certainly didn't.
Yeah, I thought it was going to be 2 or 4.
I recall in the days when they went away from having, I think, 6 PCI slots back to 4 or something, and everyone was outraged. Apple at the time said, we have surveyed our users of these cards, and less than 1% of users put in a card at all or modified the card in the Mac Pro, in our Macs. So it's like,
right.
Okay, it was Avid at the time that had a real problem with losing their slots because they needed that many cards just to run an Avid. But other companies not so much. So the need for internal cards has sort of diminished because of a lot of but there are certain things you still can't do. Like if you want to put an optical fiber connection to a laptop, I'm not sure how you go about that. But you can do it with the card, and there are some things cards will still just work for. Pro Tools users will be lost without them.
Yes. That's one of the main things that I've seen is Pro Tools. Absolutely. So.
Well, I think in 2019 it made a lot of sense that they did 8 slots because they also, at the same time as designing that, they designed these dual GPUs that would take up multiple slots, or you could put the NVMe, whatever the SSD storage,
right.
solid state storage inside it, and those units took up multiple slots. So it kind of made sense at the time. I don't know moving forward. The only comparison I could have is I don't think it's completely unprecedented for them to change over processors and keep a similar form factor or the same form factor, because when we went from the Motorola G5 PowerPC processors to the Intel processors, the cheese grater Mac Pros, you call it, Richard, is I don't think that design changed very much.
No, they're very similar. Very similar. The
So
back panel, maybe. Yeah.
I don't know, but at the same time, your argument about size and weight and if the CPU, GPU, and all that's built in, and it's more power efficient, then maybe you don't need everything. Maybe you can make a downsized Mac Pro, or maybe you see what happens when you fire up that much power to 8 M1 chips that are all fused together. I don't know.
8?
I don't know.
What are they going to call that one?
I mean,
the Extreme?
Yeah, I don't know exactly what they would do there, but it would be interesting to see what you could do throwing that much power at that type of architecture. And then if you have that integrated GPU that's so powerful, but how does that work with a PCI slotted GPU card? Those
Right.
are questions that's what I would be looking forward to at an Apple event where they're announcing a Mac Pro is what is this, what have they thought through on their end as far as what they think that is going to be beneficial and how these components are going to work together.
Yeah.
At the last event, Apple had some of those. Sorry, this is the last thing. I'll shut up for a sec. But I just think of that graph that then got kind of debunked, where they said, "Oh, we're comparing our graphics per watt versus this other card," and they kind of like cut off the chart. And people argued, no, if you keep putting power onto this GPU, it actually is much more powerful than the M1 Ultra, which the M1 Ultra is still super impressive. And I don't know how Apple did their benchmarks versus everybody else, but it makes me ask the question of, can you put a more powerful GPU in a Mac Pro and still push that even further? And how do they work together with the an M1 Ultra 2 or whatever?
Just on that debunking for a moment, the actual article only referred to Blender, one app, which is not optimized for any platform, only just recently went to Metal in its 3.1 beta release. It's not certain that, in fact, they even tested it with the Metal version because they didn't specify the version of Blender that they used. Blender probably has, 10, 15,000 users worldwide. Other apps that might have, 2, 4, 5 million users didn't get a look in. I'm just saying that perhaps that there wasn't an unbiased attempt to give a objective report.
Right. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
I know what you mean.
I don't know what Apple tested, and I wasn't really sure what they had tested. If it was Blender, that's interesting. And Apple has, recently kind of joined the whole Blender thing. That's a community that I've been fascinated with forever, and I think that software is, really the democratization tool. But it obviously is also a very steep learning curve to get into it. Right.
So there was a disturbance in the force field this week, in Final Cut Pro force field. Well, it started last week, right? It started last week with the iJustine video.
Almost a week ago, right?
Yeah. And so I started getting text messages first thing in the morning. I get up at 4 a.m. Eastern, because I go to bed early. And I'm coming up and there's a message here, and I got a message from Brad, and it says, "You got to see this video in 13 minutes. And I'm saying, okay, let me see this. And I said, holy, what? Dupe detection? Public? Talking about a beta version of Final Cut Pro? And then we had Scott Simmons come out with an article with details. And then we had, last night, Steve Martin did not only a detailed review or tutorial on the dupe detection, he also did the voice isolation. Now, we know that we would have gotten in trouble for something like that last year, in the last 10 years. Somebody would have been, gotten a call or a knock on the door or whatever. So don't you think? I mean, what has changed? Something's changed.
I mean, the inner workings of Apple, we will never discern from the outside. So what has changed is they decided to change. There's nothing more than that. I honestly think they've got a whole lot more publicity and recognition for those two features than they would have if, we waited to release and we got here's our 3 buckets for the release. So, bullet point 1, feature 1, feature 2, feature 3. Yes, that would have been a story for a day. And it's like, yay, yes, dupe detection. But because it was a leak, it spread everywhere. And so, it's almost like I mean, it has to be a deliberate leak. And I'd say what happened was that Justine got the okay to do that little leak that she did.
Right.
And immediately, everybody else that has been involved, and we pretty much know that the Mac Studio previews also shipped with the beta of Final Cut, and that was hinted by our Justine.
Okay.
So
I
so
see.
pretty much. So anyone who's got the Mac Studio and done a review on it probably also has a Final Cut Pro beta as well. So I'm suspecting that immediately that Justine video came out, that people like Scott and Richard and Steve said, "Hey guys,
right?
Why can't we do it as well?"
Right. Well, especially
I can do a really good story on this.
Well, especially Ripple. I mean, anytime there's a major Final Cut Pro update, their tutorials are coming out immediately, and they're always good. They're always good, and they're always those initial ones are always free as well. So, no, I agree.
My question is, we've been asking for the feature dupe detection for over a decade. Some of us extremely loudly have been asking for it every day. I'm looking at Sean Lander, but the question I have is, are we supposed to now? Would Apple marketing prefer us to switch and call it duplicate ranges? Because that's how it's put in there. Obviously, we haven't seen the manual and the documentation, but Steve's video said dupe detection, and then he's like, "Can you click on duplicate ranges?" And I'm like, "Okay, do we have to change our terminology?"
I think so.
I really enjoyed Steve's video though, and it answered some questions, because obviously just seeing screenshots, it's like, okay, well, how does this thing actually work?
Right.
And Steve's done, and the Scott Simmons article was really good.
Yep.
But obviously Steve walked through it with actual video tutorial, and shows exactly, several different scenarios and exactly how you would use this thing. And it's probably one of those features that, it took a while to design and implement, even though in our heads it wouldn't be that complicated. But I think it was one of those that they did very much take a great Apple design approach to it, and really thought through a lot of scenarios. I love integrating the timeline index, which I remember Alex Gollner in the past has talked about. A great way to utilize the power of dupe detection would be to implement it in the timeline index. And the way that they did that, where you click on a clip and it can kind of semi-highlight the other instances, to me is a perfect way to kind of go through that and get rid of unwanted duplicates. So well done, and it was definitely something that I even for a while was like, why do you need that? Just watch your video, you can see if you reuse the same clip. And then I was cutting a improv comedy show. We had like 5 different camera angles, and one of the camera angles was crowd cam stuff, and I'm sure this is like any comedy special. You don't just always cut to the crowd laughing at the exact moment that they're laughing. You'll pull the other clips and other angles and other people and make it work where it looks best in the edit. And this was an edit I did in Final Cut, but it was being colored in Resolve, so I brought it into DaVinci Resolve, and then I thought, in Resolve I should just check if there's some duplicate frames. And I had reused a shot a couple times, and had I had that feature in Final Cut, I wouldn't have had to change it in the finishing stage. I could have caught that early on. So that was when I kind of had to back down from my own pride and say like, oh, this is something I don't need, to like, nope, I just walked into a situation where I need this feature.
Right.
So I just think, just for Roz, they're saying that most of the iOS and iPad betas are public. It's that is the case, but this is the first time in, I'm going to say 23 years of on and off on Final Cut Pro beta programs, that from the beta program, the very first release, this is the very first time that I can recall a sanctioned reveal of a pre-release feature. There was the NAB where they had 2 in-room meetings where everyone was put under NDA.
Right.
But that was not, so there was a group of about maybe 160 people who were aware of the upcoming features. but it was under NDA, so it was under non-disclosure, just like every beta program is. So
Right.
this is a fairly significant change. It's not just, oh, this is just a little difference. No, this is a big U-turn. I mean, it's something that is like every time you're on a beta, so you're not even sure if you should mention it to other people who you're pretty sure is on a beta program.
Right.
You know, if ever we're having that conversation with somebody, we ask is like, have you heard from Johnny? And it's actually Johnny Appleseed.
Right, exactly. And my girlfriend Jane has heard so much about this in the last week. Every time I mention, she goes, I know, there's beta version of Final Cut, because I talk about it, of course, even though she's.
So yeah, I'm trying to think of, like, you mentioned the 10.3. I think that was the version that people got to see in advance, but everyone was very quiet about it. And when that happened, I thought, oh, maybe moving forward we'll get more kind of previews like this, and we didn't really. I mean, not as much, not like that, not in a more public, private setting. We saw at certain. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think the reason for that was because that required a lot of re-architecting within Final Cut. It took a longer than anticipated time. So I think it was just a way of letting the faithful know that there was something coming.
Right. Well, yes. Yeah. So that was the roles. That was roles that was previewed, right?
And role based and the role based mixer.
Yeah, role based mixer. But they even took your phones.
Well,
they even took your phones from that meeting.
No, sorry. I wish. Yes, I was projecting.
I thought at one of them they took your phones. You had to put your phones in a locker before you went into the meeting. Off the bus or something. It was the creative summit.
No, there was a creative summit. There was a creative summit.
They did that. Yeah, we had to leave the phone on the bus.
Yeah. It's like, come on.
So what I was going to say is that there was that one, and then what I've seen in the past is there's like an Apple event where they might do a demo or show something from Final Cut, like object tracking. We got that, right? They showed that at an Apple event, and then they said this is an upcoming release. So that was Apple official.
Yes.
Duplicate frame detection is probably not a sexy demo for a large Apple event. No. But it's not.
You're right.
Great feature for professional editors that we're going to get really excited about, because it is like, see, they're listening. See, this is what we want. They finally gave it to us. We're so thrilled. And then I think what you have both already said is how much buzz it created by having this casually brought up by an influencer, just thrown in there, and us kind of losing our minds. And the funny part of the conversation for me, because I actually never thought it was, in fact, I responded to you pretty quickly on Facebook, Phil. I actually never thought for a second that this was an accident. I just imagined Apple marketing being right there and saying, and by the way, could you just, do a quick little thing in your video of this for us? Thanks. Not that they controlled and scripted it for her and told her what she had to say. Of course. Marquez Brownlee, for example, just released a Mac Studio Display video. He said that Apple sent me this, and they sent me to Mac Studios, and he didn't have a super favorable. It was a fair but not a super favorable review of the Studio Display. So Apple obviously doesn't control what they say, but I'm sure with Justine there was a little bit of a, hey, this would be a fun thing to throw in there, and it definitely, I think, is paid off. And the way that Phil described it panning out, I'm sure that Steve Martin and others like, can I say something? Since come on. I think it's great.
If I'd still been in my influencer state personality, then I totally would have been onto it. Say, look, since Justine's done it, why can't I write it up the feature that you're saying? Now, the moment it wasn't. I thought it was just initially that somebody had seen something in the background of a shot as it panned across the screen, of that nature. It was an accidental leak, just possibly easy to do. But no, once she actually referred to it and pulled it out as, no, that's intentional. Just a little side story. Back in the early days of Final Cut 1.0 of the original release, I was working closely with Ron Margolis of Intelligent Media, relationship, and other than we worked together. And so we were doing a presentation at the Apple Center in Santa Monica, and Ron double clicks the project to bring up what he's going to talk about, and right there is the demo, the splash screen of the demo of the beta version of Final Cut.
I'll be darned.
Inside the Apple, I don't think anybody reported him, so I think he's got away with it to this day. But yeah, do be very, very careful if you have a beta testing software. I know one other beta tester has an entirely separate identity set up for his beta testing purposes. So most beta testers are very, very careful that they never reveal it, and so any reveal like that has got to be intentional.
So
yeah, and I don't think Justine was a formal beta tester either. I would guess it was, here's the Mac Studio, like you said, it's preloaded with this software. We want you to do a review video on it, which I'm sure she's more than happy to do.
Sure.
I don't think she was. I mean, I don't know. Maybe she was, but I would assume, being a public influencer and recording her screen a lot, that Apple probably wouldn't want her to be a normal beta tester. That would just be my assumption. And I don't think she'd really care to be a beta tester. She's got a lot of other things to do, and I would assume I've never been on the beta program, but my assumption would be that you would have to send a lot of feedback and spend some time, working with the team and letting them know how it's going. So that doesn't seem like something that Justine would have time for.
Two things. One, a good beta tester is an extremely valuable person to a software developer. Absolutely the most, and to that end, almost nobody beta tests software when they're in a beta program. So, despite the fact that it always says, do not use this in a commercial context, unless you're actually using it for the real work that you do day by day, you're not going to run into the sort of issues that will come up in your work that you run into day by day. So you've really got to work with beta software on real projects. And the second part is, yes, those who provide a lot of useful feedback are invited back to other beta programs.
Yes. So the features that they've shown us, the fact that they've given us two, whatever you want to call them, two, both of them are fairly big features. The one question I have about the voice isolation, I'm not sure, Philip, what's the difference between, I think Steve Martin called it, what did he call it? Not IA.
Noise reduction?
No, he called
machine
it
learning.
Machine learning. What's the difference between machine learning and IA? Or
AI?
Artificial. Yeah.
AI. Sorry.
Artificial intelligence is kind of an umbrella term. It means literally that, an artificial intelligence, something that can think for itself or something, and it's generally conceptualized as autonomous artificial intelligence. That would be your Skynet or robot from Lost in Space, items like that.
Okay.
We are nowhere near close to that, and there's a lot of people who are not sure that we ever should get that close to that for aforementioned reasons. And so most of when people talk about artificial intelligence, they're really talking about machine learning in its various kinds.
Okay.
And machine learning it's the old way of doing something. It was somebody like Greg will work out an algorithm, a way of treating this thing so that we get a result that we want at the other end. And these math can be quite complicated in visual processing. They can be quite complicated in just translations. But you simply write an algorithm. Whereas with the most common type of machine learning, you provide the learning machine, which is a bunch of neural networks, but we don't need to know that right now, with a lot of examples and graded examples. So like if you're trying to teach it what a hand was, you would have a whole lot of images that were hands, and they would be labeled as, yes, this is a hand, yes, this is a hand, yes, this is a hand. And then you would have a whole lot of images that didn't have hands in them, but had other shapes, and they would say, this is not a hand, this is not a hand, and so on over those examples. Over a couple of million, say, radiology examples that show, here's a sample that has a tumor in it, here's a sample that doesn't have a tumor. The machine learns to recognize for itself what is a hand or what is and then you give that trained, that's the training phase. You get that trained machine a new set of source material, of original material, and see if it develops the right results without the training background data of like, this is the result that you should be looking for. So it's the most common way that machines are trained for this sort of thing. And in the case of machine learning, there would be a whole lot of examples of here's voice in background, here's a background without voice, and the machine gets enough examples and it determines how to separate the voice from the background without just filtering frequencies, which is the way the old approach worked.
Okay.
And that's a gross oversimplification for anybody into artificial intelligence. That's a gross oversimplification. But I wrote a really deep article.
But as far as I can understand it.
On artificial intelligence on philiphodgetts.com last September. The pace of change in artificial intelligence and entertainment is changing so freaking dramatically. I did a draft. My original draft was done in March, April, May last year, and I said, at some point in time, these automatic speech generation tools and these and something like NVIDIA's MetaHumans are going to merge. Well, before we go to publish it in September, in August, I had to rewrite it and say, well, that's already happened. We can just go to synthesia.io and you can type in your text and your spokesmodel video will be rendered out for you in about 11 minutes.
Right.
With a completely artificial images, completely artificial voice, but perfect sound and no cameras to set up. And then in that rewritten version, I suggested that, well, perhaps there's a way of taking that, because NVIDIA's MetaHumans require human performance at the moment, the motion capture performance. Well, I said, well, maybe there's a way of taking some of these other trends that are happening and sort of just doing straight, maybe package performances. Well, NVIDIA now, let's less than 6 months later, have another way of taking, here's your speech and here's your actual 3D model speaking your speech that you typed in, and you chose the mood. I want this speech with an angry overtone. I want this bit with a happy overtone. And Richard, you do a lot of music, don't you? Well, there's the three services that I'm looking at the moment, like ToneStone. It's very like what's the soundtrack building tool? Soundstage. You actually build a soundtrack to a virtual duration of custom for a video, and they'll kill me because I.
You mean the one for Logic?
No, this was a third-party tool that you integrated with Final Cut, integrates with Premiere, and you can say, I want to have a piece of music that's customized from this, customized for specific tracks. Well, what ToneStone will do is you say, I would like something in an upbeat. Well, let me just look at it. So, they've changed their website. Yeah. So you can just set up the sort of style that you want. The sort of like I want a happy, or I want a corporate background video track, and then say I need it to be about 2 minutes long, and I'd like it to be sort of rocky or country and rock, and it will generate 10 unique original tracks of that duration with melody, and you can then go in and edit those tracks. All royalty free. You could build a background for a song if you want to be a singer. One of their license free song creation for other platforms and titles. So you could create some music for yourself and then write your own lyrics to that and perform it, and you have rights to that. And that's just one of 3 similar services that are happening on the scene now from using machine learning and artificial intelligence to generate these things. So we're going to see so much of this. In fact, if you're in Montreal in June, I'll be keynoting at a conference there on artificial intelligence and the entertainment industry. So,
is that right?
Wow.
Yeah, it originally was scheduled
Nice
in February, but yeah, thank you. but June in Montreal was so much nicer. So I'm glad that they were forced to move it.
Yeah.
So since they've given us 2 big features, I think both of them.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to say this. You guys don't have to even comment. I think there's more in 10.6.2 than just these 2. Do you think there's only?
Think so.
Oh, I think so.
I commented earlier that Apple have 3 buckets. Everything around every Apple presentation is in 3 buckets. So there are always 3 highlighted features in every release. So to expect more would be another huge departure. We've had one huge departure, so maybe another huge departure.
I realize, but it seems like if they were going to preview these the way they've done with this, why not just release it if that's all there is? Why the preview? Why not just release 10.6.2? Here's your 2 features. I can't imagine that's all there is. I mean, it seems like there's more.
I don't know. Been looking every Tuesday or whatever. I mean, every day, but Tuesdays seem like a release day for Apple and a lot of stuff. So I'm looking, but they did say iMovie was going to be out in April, so I kind of look at that and say, well, Final Cut and iMovie share some code, and they're both video apps, so maybe it'll be the same. And there's this little thing happening in April. It used to be bigger, but it's smaller now. I don't know. I was fascinated by everything Philip was saying about voice isolation, or about machine learning, and thinking about voice isolation. It obviously is a feature that they've been touting on their devices for a while. Like, I'm wearing these AirPods Maxes, and it has a transparency mode and a noise cancellation mode and a normal kind of in-between mode. And what they're able to do, like with transparency mode on the AirPods Maxes, is insane. I feel the AirPods on my head, but it doesn't sound like I have headphones on, if that makes sense. So obviously, this is a great example of Apple developing technologies in other areas, and the Pro Apps team saying, "Well, hey, we've already got. Can we do a little crossover and grab some of that for this?" Which is, where the same thing happened with cinematic mode, where I saw before we had the portrait mode and we saw the blurred backgrounds and the AI, and I questioned, when is that going to come to video and when is that going to come into Final Cut? And they simultaneously did those things at the same time. So, and that right there is also an area I think that is in its infancy. I think we'll see a lot more control over focus and post and professional cameras and applications in the future. So I like when Apple, takes that. I would love for, just like photos on the iPhone, for example. It's not photos, but photos on the iPhone is something that scans through a lot of things and identifies faces, and I'm assuming uses some machine learning. When we first came out with Final Cut Pro, that was in the that whole feature of analyzing our content analyzing content and trying to pick out different shots was really fascinating, but it was slower and less useful than I was hoping it would be. So I think there's other areas where Apple has certain technologies, like in photos and scanning your photos and identifying things, that could be very useful for keyword generation. And Philip's probably the smartest person to talk to about when are keywords useful and why we might need a feature along with that, like a keyword editor, so that we're not seeing every keyword and every smart collection that Final Cut's generating, but we're able to filter through what's actually useful for us as editors. I'm assuming you've thought about that with your tools.
At the time we were creating Builder, we were also experimenting with automatic keyword extraction, and that's why Builder has a keyword manager in there that actually has the ranking that has been come of the accuracy or the estimated accuracy that's coming from the provider of the keywords. Ultimately, as much as I would love to say that that's an area that artificial intelligence has really helped with, we can get a lot of keywords, and it's particularly helpful in archives or B-roll because we can search for stuff that we haven't identified. In photos, for example, I can search for coyote or I can search for bobcat, even though I haven't tagged my photos as such. And it will find them. It finds sunrises and sunsets, differentiates them because it knows which way the camera was pointing at the time. And so, we already have a lot of these features coming in to the tools that we're using. Yeah, in photos, it's just transparent. Just do a search for something that you haven't necessarily tagged, and you'll be surprised, how accurate. A squirrel, it recognizes squirrels pretty well.
Right, right.
It's not so good with species of birds or species of squirrel, but time is time. But that stuff is really useful for when you're analyzing images. You want to know what's in those images. But when it comes to keyword extraction, absolutely, you can get keywords easy. And in amongst the 10 or 12 leading results will be the keyword that you want. But it's going to take you just as long to extract it, to work out which keyword you want. There's a difference between getting keywords even concept keywords, which are harder than keywords themselves.
Right.
That from your text, and but it's much harder to get useful and relevant keywords that are important for your project. And that's where we still haven't moved in the last 3 years, and I'm not seeing any big breakthrough in that area in the next 3 years. But everywhere else across production, absolutely. I have a little camera mount. It's artificial intelligence controlled. It's got its own camera. It tracks me. All I have to do is touch a button. It locks onto my face or my body, and it tracks me around the room. And it's like under $200, under 150, I think, when I bought it, because it was a Kickstarter campaign. But the artificial intelligence is going to be everywhere. If you really want to see how it can fit into our editing workflows, Premiere Pro and Adobe have gone a lot further with Sensei than Apple have. I mean, and the point I was going to make earlier is that a casual conversation with an engineer at Apple that was not under NDA, so I feel I can at least mention this part of it.
Right.
Was that the architecture that is in Final Cut for content auto analysis could be used for any future machine learning analysis as well, because I was asking it in that context. And so and it was only about 3 or 4 years ago that they hired somebody for the Final Cut Pro team as a machine learning specialist. It was around the time of the last in-person Creative Summit. So
2019.
it was just before that. Yeah. So, and it takes about 2 years for somebody to ramp up the feature. So we're about on track for somebody who came on board early 2020. They took 6 months to get on track, get something prioritized, and about 2 years to get a feature out. That's about the way it works.
So, Phil, I have to talk about this one thing that you just mentioned earlier, a couple minutes back, when you said AI, and you talked about we should be cautious with AI, like this, the whole Terminator and RoboCop,
Yeah.
and so you're being serious, right?
I am. There are people who are very concerned. I mean, if we got see what happens with artificial intelligence is that it moves in almost exponential leaps. It doesn't move just incrementally. So, arguably, the day that we have fully autonomous artificial intelligence, it will by sometime in that afternoon, it will be about 10 times more powerful or capable than the human mind. By 2 days later, we will be comparably insects on the planet to be eradicated, because we're getting in the way of the efficiency of the machine. So
right.
That's a worst case, scary scenario, but it's not an impossible, it's not an unbelievable scenario, and so it makes it a little bit concerning. So,
can we just put make sure it all has a master kill switch somewhere that they can't get rid of? That they can't get rid of. Even a physical switch. We just but that's what we have to have, is some kind of a
Yeah, because the interesting thing about machine learning is that it seems on the surface that really nobody knows what's going on and how it actually decided to come up with the result it comes, which can be concerning when machines are unique to determine whether you get a loan or
right.
You get parole. I mean, these are algorithms at the moment, but we could run the risk of entrenching current biases within machines if we train them on the current data set. So yeah, there's a lot to worry about, but I think there's a lot, the worrying side. I'd like to think, things to worry about are still impossible. That's the most important thing, I think, is that we're not, artificial intelligence at that level does not exist. That's not to say it won't exist in 6 years or in 6 months,
right.
But at this point, it doesn't exist, and the steps towards it don't exist. But I will repeat. One of my favorite YouTube channels is called 2 Minute Papers. And it looks at current research projects, and the troublesome thing is that it's getting it used to be, here's a paper from 2017 and here's the 2019 improvement. Well, now it's sort of like, here's a paper from last September and here's the current next generation improvement on that. The pace of change is about tripled in the relatively short 3 or 4 years that I've been more closely looking at this space. And it's in visual processing and creating background. One website that I went to, and I've lost the link out of my own article, but you can simply go to that site and say, I'd like a bear with a bowler hat and a red bow tie, and that was the image that would be generated just from your text.
Wow.
There are
Well-
other sites where you can go and you say, I'd like it like a big poster portrait, apocalyptic green extinction, and it will come up with a site and choose the style, and it will come up with a poster size image of that type of thing, just out of the they're composites from elements that's been given. If you analyze it, that's what they're doing. But that's what Adobe doing with automatic sky replacement. They're doing it with content aware fill.
Okay.
All these things are looking for other things similar and then just substituting, because the artificial intelligence enhanced, computer enhanced, which is increasingly real, isn't enhancing the details. The computer is actually creating what it thinks those details should look like based on its experience of other images like that. So it's really quite challenging to sit back and realize that everything around us isn't changing. Almost every part of pre-production of deep fakes, we can bring actors back from the dead. We can create music soundtracks. Even a couple of years ago, I tracked, over a 2-year period, an AI that no longer exists, but a machine that was being trained to write its own music. And from about 2014, it sounded like a bad video game soundtrack from 2008.
Right.
But 2 years later, it had taught itself, and it was now composing, good enough to use for a retirement living advertisement or corporate piece, and now the artificial intelligence can just create AVIA, artificial interactive AIVA. The soundtrack coming out of that machine are as good as any live composer I've ever come across. And voice synthesized voiceover. There are a lot of companies now.
Yes.
And honestly, synthesized voiceover and synthesized presenters, which I mentioned before, are taking over. I haven't used a live presenter in 7 months.
So speaking of that, do you think we're going to get in Final Cut at some point some kind of a text where they can they can listen to audio and make text within Final Cut for subtitles? Sure. And just I wish they had like a separate notes tab.
Well, if once you get beyond simply doing closed captions of your finished result, no NLE is going to do the job. And without a massive rewrite, no NLE is good for working with transcripts actually to build your story.
Okay.
That's why we built an NLE that does that. I mean, Builder is an NLE. It's just optimized for working with text rather than only working with audio and video. And none of the NLEs can retrofit that into there. So even though you can now in Premiere Pro, you can have your sequences transcribed for closed captions.
Right.
That's not a workflow for making stories and building our stories out of interviews like Brad did with Off the Tracks, and probably does every day of his job. That because no NLE works for that we had to build something that did, and it's an entirely different approach. Even when transcription is free, and ultimately quality, fully accurate transcription will become free. That's the trend. Ultimately, there'll be no cost for accurate transcripts, but that doesn't lose any valid benefit to Builder, because Builder is basically already working from transcripts from outside of Builder. It doesn't. You can't go back those transcripts into your NLE because it's simply not going to get you the most efficient way of building a story. Stories get built in word processors, and then somebody, poor sucker, has to actually sit down and conform all that. Well, every time you conform it, you've got a day or so in the edit bay to charge out, or you just click play in Builder.
Right. So, speaking of AI, I've been using this app called what is it called? Topaz Video Enhance AI. So it's a noise reduction. It's not a plugin, it's an app. But what I'm amazed at, not only that it has different algorithms on which noise model you're going to use, it has multiple ones you can try them out, preview them. It enlarges the video at the same time. So I can go from standard def to 200%. it takes care of dark video, and it does a great job, but it also enlarges it. That's what amazes me at the same time. Not only denoises, but it also enlarges, which the other major denoise plugin that people use doesn't do the enlarging of it.
Scaling and frame rate conversion by AI are already there. They're already proven technologies. They're already commercially available. And there are lots of examples on YouTube of where films from 120, 130 years ago that were, hand cranked have been upraised to 60 frames per second, 4K color material, thanks to the improvements of AI. Colorizing a black and white material is again something that there's a whole range of AIs can just do that off the shelf. Although I use Synthesia.io for a lot of my work, I was talking to a guy in India, an entrepreneur there, and he pointed me to a Rephraser.ai, I think the company is, and they take, like, say, a piece of video from a famous sports personality, and then they make customized versions in the thousands to anybody who sort of fills out a web form.
Right.
And say, I'd like to send this greeting to my niece, and so then the original performance is modified to give that greeting with that name specifically to that person. Now they're using a lot more whole body, so their movement and their avatars do look a lot more realistic than the head and shoulders of Synthesia's version 1. But I'm looking, you look at NVIDIA's MetaHumans, and I really, if you haven't looked at that before, it is going to blow your mind. And if you haven't looked at Synthesia.io before, I strongly recommend, because these are directions that we're going to be going. Synthesia is at the moment, just beyond the uncanny valley. If you look at it for any length of time, you'll start to see little things that don't quite look right.
Sure.
But it's for talking head intro and a little linking piece, and you don't notice that very much, and most people aren't as critical viewers as we in the industry are. But this is today. Well, 6-8 months from now, there'll be a competing product that will leapfrog that. Then their version 2 will leapfrog that, and within 2 years, we'll have performances that aren't necessarily Olivia, but are good enough for corporate and educational purposes, and voiceovers that don't require any like human involvement. I mean, these are going to certainly disrupt the incomes and livelihoods of a lot of people.
You're right.
I have a dear friend who's trying to get into voiceover. Just make some of her living from doing voiceover, and I've advised her, stick to the emotional parts. Don't try and build anything for the routine everyday voiceover stuff. Stick to the stuff that requires you to have an strong emotional response, because that's the only future for voiceover.
Right. So, Brad, what is Blackmagic going to reveal to NAB? Are they going to have because
when I was talking
Resolve
to
18 probably, right? But are they going to do like a 24, 12 times? What do they have now? The camera, is it 12? The highest end one?
They have a 12K. They have the 12K camera, which uses a Super 35 sensor. I mean, I don't know. They could create an 8K pocket camera for all I know. I'm more interested to see what they might do. Maybe it's because of listening to Philip talk a lot about machine learning, and then the fact that Lumberjack Builder is built around text editing, and then some of this crazy voiceover generation stuff. I don't know if you have both looked at Descript's ability to like fix voiceover flubs, and you can retype it and it will fix that and all that stuff. Yeah.
They spent $4 million of their first $25 million funding. They spent $4 million of their first $25 million funding to buy Lyrebird to get that feature.
Wow.
It's well, and their noise. It's funny because they have a remove background noise, but it's not what Final Cut's doing with voice isolation. It's literally reconstructing your voice with like an AI. So that's fascinating. I'm interested going back to Blackmagic though, of what they might do in Resolve, because go ahead, Phil.
I was going to say, there is an actual tool that will now sample your voice and generate a fake voice for you. You now only need about 30 seconds of an original voice to create a completely fake version of it saying anything that you want it to say.
Do you have to say certain words in that 30 seconds?
Nope.
Really?
30 seconds of yeah. And I mean,
I want
Anthony
to.
Bourdain in the Anthony Bourdain documentary, they have a piece in there that it was something written by Anthony Bourdain, but he never said it out loud. But he speaks it in the documentary, and there's been a
Wow.
couple of examples of this already where people have been. There's a documentary of JFK where they generated the voice, JFK's voice, of a speech that he was going to give had he made it through that day in Texas. So this is there are a lot of ethical questions about this because
Right, of
once
course.
you get to deep fakes, so yeah, so and Blackmagic are already deeply down. I mean, deeply down the machine learning path. The machine learning divisions within all of these companies, as far as I know. So yeah, they already have some machine learning features in there, and they'll have more, I'm sure.
And are they looking at what like the color? I think it's like Color Labs AI or whatever. Are they looking at what those tools are doing? Are they that's what I'm interested to see with the next kind of generation of DaVinci Resolve is, are they going to be giving us some new features or streamlined features, and how are they? The last version of Resolve was mostly just UI enhancements. So I'm interested to see if they're going to do some new features. What is Resolve? What version? We're on 16 point something. So, or is it 17?
I think we're on 17. Yeah,
we're on 17. So
yeah.
what's Resolve 18 going to be? The cameras, I mean, they're fantastic tools. They hit a good budget, quality versus budget price point. I don't think that their cameras are for everybody. I think like you look at a GH6 or you look at some of the Sony cameras, and they have maybe better built-in stabilization or some easier features to run and gun and be solo. But compared to high-end cinema cameras, the Blackmagic cameras are great budget solutions. So I imagine they'll continue to push that. But yeah, maybe they'll try to steal the show at NAB, but they sort of drifted away from that and have done more events throughout the year,
right,
and haven't leaned all on NAB. And of course, we've had a couple of years where there has not really been any NAB other than some online stuff. So who knows what they got cooking, but I'm fascinated about that. As I listen to Philip talk, I also look at other trends, like generational trends that are more dealing with culture. Maybe it's a kickback against some of this. And it's very fascinating to me that taking Polaroid pictures, for example, is a trendy thing among Gen Zers, or being more authentic. Or I watched some YouTube videos by a guy named Rick Beto, and he was reviewing some modern pop songs and recordings he liked and songs he didn't. And of course, he's an older guy who's been a musician and a recording artist for many years. And something that was fascinating to me is the songs he liked, and I think that this translates to even younger people, are not perfect. And it's like when somebody's a little bit, they're really close to being on key, but they're a little bit off key, they're a little bit off tempo, and things sound more real and like a real human did that. And I thought that must be a response to how perfect we are making, perfect. We're humans. Nothing we make is really perfect. But through all this, when Philip's talking about a computer that can compose something, it's interesting that there's a search for authenticity, which maybe machines will find the authenticity algorithm and it will be built in. But I think that's a response to how like why do we add film grain? Like this was something Chione talked about years ago, which was when they grade at light iron, they he asked his colorists, how often do you not apply film grain? So they'll go through and they'll do a denoise pass, and then they'll add back on uniform film grain. And they said there's not one project where we don't apply at least a little film grain to it. And so maybe there's something to be said for us wanting to almost, react in a negative way or push back against it. If you look at the Disney Plus series Mandalorian and then the Boba Fett show, there was different approaches to kind of recreating a young Luke Skywalker.
Right.
And a lot of the reviews I saw on Luke Skywalker showed up in the Boba Fett version is, what's the deal with his voice? Why does he talk so monotone? Did they get Mark Hamill to actually record lines? Or is this some sort of machine learning voiceover? It sounds like it's, maybe something somebody typed in and they got the performance based off of that. And there was sort of this negative or cringy reaction to it being a not authentic person. Of course, you can't really make Mark Hamill physically in the real world de-age him. And our voices change over time as well. But Mark Hamill's a fantastic voice actor. So I'm just looking at the commentary and the way people are reacting and theorizing about the implementations of how this is being used, and then this like desire to be more. I think like I said, the word is authentic.
Well, it's interesting
on that.
If you watch the Beatles documentary, the 6 hours of video on Get Back that was on Disney, I got Disney just for that documentary. I didn't realize that John Lennon absolutely refused to do a single overdub for that album. Nobody can do an overdub. No overdubs of vocals, no overdubs of bass, guitar, whatever. And that's the reason that Billy Preston came in, because Paul wasn't going to play bass on a couple of songs, and they got Billy Preston to do keyboards. They wanted to do keyboards and piano both. And no overdubs, period. So that's interesting, because that's really, once I saw that, I went back and got the stripped down version, the version they released back in those days on Apple Records. They sent to Phil Spector in the United States, and he added strings and all that stuff, which is exactly the opposite of what John Lennon wanted done. Now, they went back to overdubs and stuff for Abbey Road after that, but that one album was pure live performance. Every take on that album was a pure live performance, which I found refreshing.
Yeah. I mean, that is the question.
My vocal coach insists we do some live performances just for that reason. Even if they're recorded, don't create a music video, just do a live performance, because that's a different thing than doing a perfect studio recording and then doing some visuals with it.
Yes.
And she constantly points out to me and other students that what you hear on the commercial radio is actually a very controlled, probably unsingable version of particularly a pop song, because they come into each line fresh. They don't have to have the breath in between. So, there's a whole lot of unnatural singing going on commercial releases that, can't really be done as a live performance. And she's very adamant that we all learn that skill of actually performing live, not having to fall back on re-recording tricks or, pitch correction or anything like that.
Right, absolutely. So the next question people always ask is, when are we going to see 10.6.2? What are your takes? I've been saying for a while, I think it's going to be in proximity to NAB. That would make,
I would, yeah, I would say so.
Probably,
I mean, the fact that we're actually seeding the beta release to journalists and reviewers probably suggests we're fairly close to release. The way a beta cycle has tended to go is that it's a very controlled release at the beginning. It's only like essential people only, and then it comes out to a little broader people, and then it comes out to a point where trainers and educators will get an advanced view, and then the final round of opening up is generally to the reviewers and the like, because they want to have a review ready on the day it's released.
Right.
I was given for the original release of Final Cut Final Cut 10 version 1. A week before it was released, I was invited down to Santa Monica to a room, and I was shown the new version and got my questions answered. And then they sent me home with a 17-inch MacBook Pro SSD and the version of Final Cut on it for me to review. Now, exactly 1 week before it was released. Now, we've already seen a week since that leak, so we're not, and since those journalists were seeded. So, but I would think around NAB is probably the target, and the fact that iMovie has been slated at the same time.
Right.
It's not just they share. it's not just that they share code; they are the same app, which is with interfaces and elements turned off.
Is that right?
Interface tweak, and then yep. No, it's changed over the years. The original iMovie was not anything to do with Final Cut. Has no code in common with what then became Final Cut 10. I mean, Randy's original iMovie, the version became, it was a foundation for Final Cut Pro 10, was in fact designed by Randy as a producer's pre-editing tool. It was never intended to be a consumer tool. It was Steve Jobs that said, "No, that's right. We'll make that our next iMovie." So, if that had been released first to say, here's the producer's tool, now here's the professional version of Final Cut Pro 10, that would have had a whole different story around it, but that wasn't the way history went.
Yeah.
So, yeah, the programs open up as they get closer to release. And so the fact that we're at the journalist stage at this point probably suggests around an NAB release.
That's what I figured. Even if Apple's not going to be there officially, because I know people have said, when was it last year when NAB made a mistake and put Apple as a list of something.
Yeah,
I knew that. I said that doesn't sound right. People kept going back to the original release of Final Cut Pro 10, the Super Meat, and I kept saying Apple's been there in 2017 and 2018 in an official capacity on the show in the actual convention center. Apple, the Final Cut Pro team, presented officially at the convention center, so it didn't go back all the way to that original release. They've been there presently. That's when they announced the 2 million and 2.5 million seats of Final Cut Pro.
Well, the 10 release was at the Super Meet, so that was off,
Right.
Anyway, so Philip, I guess since we've been talking about machine learning and then Final Cut and iMovie basically being the same app, just features turned off. There's an iMovie feature that was pre-announced, which was what do they call it? Basically, it's going to scan through your footage and find the exciting bits and pre-build your edits for you. Have you any insights or thoughts on what that is going to be like? And
go to Magistro,
I think
head over to Magistro or Magisto.com and see what it's going to look like, because it's already doing that. It scans through your footage. It builds a quite reasonable edit. I mean, it's not art. It's not, you're not trying to manipulate any emotion, except if it's grandkids and grandparents, it's easy. But there's been a number of people doing auto edits, automatic video editing for quite a while, and that's just one of them. So I expect that it will look a lot like that.
Yeah, I mean, we have photos as memories, which basically just pulls videos and photos, and I enjoy watching some of those. There's always like 3 or 4 photos in there though, or video clips that I'm like, why did you choose that one? So, but hey, it's still, I didn't have to do anything. I just hit play, so it's fine.
Yeah, it's Magisto, Magisto.com.
Okay.
So make it only minutes with the power of Magisto's smart video editor, video superhero. Like that reminds me of Video 100 Kill the Editor back in 1999 or 2000. They had a campaign where they were empowering individual people, right? So it's like, kill the editor. And that went down really well with the fact that most of the customers were editors.
Well, they took the editor category out of the Oscars this year. Is that what they did, or something?
No, they take it out. They're going to show highlights, so they'll run the actual award during the commercial break. And there's a few of these, and obviously this editing has been one of the categories on the chopping block, ironically, for a couple of years now. And this year, they're just going to show the highlight when you come back. And this person won editing. Honestly, I don't care. I was pretty annoyed before, but in a lot of ways, I feel like the Academy is less relevant than it's ever been.
Yeah,
so,
of course. Yeah.
Not against the Academy as an organization, and there's some friends and people in it, but just the award show itself. They are looking. There's the rating side of it, and then the viewership side of getting people to watch it, and it's a long show, and what Hollywood deems is the movies that are important are not always the what the mass viewership wants to actually tune in for. And it doesn't necessarily have to be. I think there was who said it? Was it Seth Rogen or somebody made a funny quote about like, this is an award show for our own industry. It's not like people like tuning into the plumbing awards or other industries award shows. So I think I'm okay with that. But the question is whether or not editing gets the respect it deserves when, what has been pointed out by many people, not just editors, is that it is one of the most unique. It is completely unique to cinema versus, other types of performances. So to not acknowledge it is a little upsetting, but again, I'm kind of over it. I don't even know if I'll tune in this week and watch the Academy Awards. I'll check out the winners. I'll glance at it Monday morning or something.
Yeah.
And see who won and see if there's any movies that sound interesting. But my favorite movie of last year, well, I don't know if it was my favorite, but probably one of the best movies I saw was Pig with Nicolas Cage. Jan Kovac, our own Final Cut editor, was actually an additional editor on that. And the guy who scored my movie, Caleb Blood, said he was an additional composer or music. I can't remember exactly what they credited him as, but he said he did about 25% of the music in it. And he also did the whole score for Off the Tracks. So there was 2 Off the Tracks connections to that. But Pig was completely overlooked by the Academy Awards. And I know Nicolas Cage has starred in a lot of movies and a lot of them are not so good.
Right.
But,
I was just going to say, yeah.
But Pig was a really, really good movie.
Now I have to go back and watch that one, because when I go through the just what are we going to watch? What are we going to watch? And I go through Amazon Prime and I go through Netflix and I go through Apple TV and Disney or whatever, and like every other one, Nicolas Cage is in. I said, this has got to be good because he's a movie star. Well, some of them aren't so good, but I saw Pig and I haven't watched that, so now I have to go back and watch that one specifically.
Yeah, and Jan's name was the first one to pop up at the end credits.
Okay.
So the first thing that popped up, additional editor Jan Kovac, and I was like, "Yay, Jan, go Jan!"
Yeah.
I'm sure it was edited on Avid, but I'm not going to give anybody any hope that it was on Final Cut. But still, he's an advocate and loves Final Cut, so I like seeing Jan's name put out there. And then I was going to say, if you want to see a good actor in a lot of terrible movies, then you go down the Bruce Willis rabbit hole and your mind will be blown. He's been in like a dozen movies in the last year and a half or so, and they're all super low budget. My guess is they paid him, a couple $1 million to show up for a couple days, but it is mind blowing to see how bad these movies are. And Bruce Willis, like literally being fed lines through an earpiece and just kind of like standing there in a scene and green screened into scenes, like poorly green screened into scenes. And then a really like crappy body double for wide shots and reverse shots. And it's just like, I guess he's just trying to cash in and get as much money as quickly as possible. I don't know what his motivations are.
I guess.
But it's really depressing because I rewatched Sixth Sense recently.
Right.
And, like Die Hard, and there's other like Bruce Willis, and he's such an amazing actor.
He is.
And it's really depressing to see these action movies.
I agree with
recently.
you.
It's just
he's another one that I'm looking
sad.
at. Oh, there's Bruce Willis movie. My girlfriend's not as impressed, but I'm always waiting for that good one to come through. But yeah, so Sixth Sense, M. Night Shyamalan, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was there.
Yeah, I rewatched that movie and thought, well, no wonder why M. Night hasn't been as popular since then, because he made a perfect movie and
it was.
There's nowhere to go from there.
Yeah. He's
the top. You're done.
He's doing the series on Apple TV right now. But we have a comment. In episode 8 of Suspicion on Apple TV, they feature Final Cut Pro on a monitor and the pre-title opening. I saw that. I was looking at the preview and I saw that in there. So,
Richard, I'm going to have to wrap in a few minutes. So Greg just texted me. He's on his way home with dinner lunch. So.
Okay. So, Philip, what's happening at Castle Greg and Philip?
Well, Greg's in the middle of a very fun project at the moment. He's rewriting Lumberyard, one of the Lumberjack apps from scratch, rewriting it as a Swift app because it's now it's only about 8 or 9 year old app, and it was written in Ruby originally. So it was time to rewrite that, and it's it's an experiment because a lot of our apps are Ruby apps. So this is a first pass at translating an app from one code to another and bringing it forward into the modern era. And we've had since we last spoke, we've added one more app to the Mac App Store, which is Reading is Fundamental.
I have
which
it.
is our first workflow. Thank you. Our first workflow extension, and Trader's Best Friend now has a workflow extension as a consequence.
Okay.
Reading is Fundamental is just simply because I had a friend that I was editing her reel for it, and she would send me some notes and backwards and forwards, and I could tab over to pages or tab over to numbers. Like,
exactly.
No, here's the window that opens pretty much anything that Quick Look will open. The one thing that we wish it would do and that it won't do at the moment is to allow you to copy out of it and paste and copy out, particularly. And that's the limitation of the framework that we're using. There's a developer technical support issue because what we want is available, just not to us. So we have to ask for a private framework to be opened up to a public framework.
So our friend Tangier Clark just said, Greg and Philip have an amazing food website as well.
The semi-serious.com, yeah. Semi-serious, yeah, because we're not that serious.
Well, let's hope for an in-person Final Cut Pro Summit this year in the fall.
Yeah,
very much, yes.
Yeah, that would be good. It can be hybrid. It can, for people that can't make it, it can have a, virtual side. There's no reason why they can't do it, but let's have an in-person one for goodness sakes. I'm planning on going to NAB. Are you going, Brad? You hadn't made up your mind last time I talked to you.
I don't think I'm going to have time to go, but if I do have an exhibits pass, and if something is happening that you know about that I have to be there for, then I would make a mad dash for Las Vegas. Fortunately, I mean, for me, it's like a 6-hour drive. I can go down there. I just would need to find a place to stay.
Right.
So let me know. I don't know. Are you going to be there, Phil? I don't know what's
Philip's
really
not
happening.
He's going to Italy with
our community. Oh, right.
Yeah, Greg and I are going to Italy for 2 weeks. So sorry, we won't be there.
Yeah.
I mean, I would love to see people there, but if there's nothing. Well, my first NAB was the 2015 one.
Okay.
And the biggest reason why I probably would have gone 10 years earlier, to be honest, especially if I'd known more about the Super Meet. I watched Super Meet videos, but I didn't really connect that as well. But the Final Cut, that's when they did the FCP exchange for the first time.
Right.
And
right. That's
what sort of got me out there and met Mike Matzdorf and some other people there that year, and Sam Messman. So if there's not something kind of like that, some booth someplace, and IllumaForge had some stuff for us to hang out. If there's not really a meeting place and a thing happening,
yeah, I think it's being sorted out.
I don't like being spread out.
So IllumaForge is going to be at the OWC desk.
Yeah, if somebody announced something, I'll be there. All right, if I got to go too.
Okay.
Actually.
All right.
So,
sounds good, Brad. I will talk to you whenever Final Cut Pro comes out. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. We'll talk to everybody later. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks, Brad.
All right. We'll see you.